LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the January 3rd edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Happy New Year 2021. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing, at least what I'm going to continue doing through January 24th of this month, when Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States, although that's one of the things we'll be talking about. This week I have the 14 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really educational, informative, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all tonight. Down in the video description, I put a link to my list of my 14 clips, the notes I used to tell me what I was supposed to say, or kind of remind me what I was supposed to say. I already got a super chat contribution from Matthew with like a #1 fan gif. I appreciate all my live viewers. I appreciate the super chat contributions, just all the live comment contributions that I watch while, mainly while I play the clips, although I just happened to switch over to make sure that you could hear me and everything, because I had so many problems last week. Where actually I have a battery problem with my laptop, and somehow the laptop got unplugged, and I didn't notice that it quickly ran out of power, and it like shut down, and I had to like frantically plug it back in, and that's what happened last week, if you were wondering. And I have 99% power right now, and it's plugged in, but I have to get my battery serviced. But anyway, the two topics this week are, the main one is Republicans. And when I get to that in a minute, I'll talk a little bit more about what a republic is. I thought I had my law dictionary. Well, I forgot about that. But anyway, the main topic there is about President Trump, and it looks like about a dozen senators, about 140 Republicans in Congress on this Wednesday are going to contest the fair and free election that gave Joe Biden the presidency. That's why Joe Biden's going to be president in 13 more days. And I'm going to show you all of the 5 corporate outlets cross-examining some Republican on this topic. Mainly, the first two are, the longest ones are Chuck Todd versus Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, and then Jake Tapper versus Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio. And Chuck Todd actually does a pretty good job. I'm going to address a comment I got from a recorded show viewer last week. In fact, I can give you a sneak peek. This is what Nil Gravity said last week. People hate Chuck Todd because he's a moron and a tool. He sees his job as defending the status quo, not reporting the facts. And that's when I was talking about how I miss Tim Russert. Maybe people hate Chuck Todd because he's not Tim Russert. And I think Chuck Todd did a pretty good job of actually defending the facts, talking to Ron Johnson today, although not as good a job as Jake Tapper did talking to Mike DeWine. Then you'll also get to see Bret Baier on Fox News try to get Kelly Loeffler to take any position on the issue at all, which he totally avoids. And that's the other big news coming up this week, the Tuesday Georgia Senate race, which I'll talk about a little bit during the news summaries. And then I'll have one clip at the end about the vaccine distribution problems, how there was supposed to be there's supposed to be 20 million people vaccinated by the end of 2020, and there were only about 4 million. And at the rate we're going, it would take like 5 years to vaccinate everyone. And I'll do some math at the end when I show you a clip of Jake Tapper cross-examining U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams. But for my political comedy clip that's on the first topic, it's actually from the Fox News program Justice with Jeanine, or Justice with Judge Jeanine is the name of the program. I put a link in the video description to more video of Justice of Judge Jeanine Pirro. And you notice that they advertise her, the host, as a lawyer and a judge, right in the title of the program, but she totally folds on a basic something really simple in constitutional law, specifically what it says in the 20th Amendment about when the president's supposed to be inaugurated. And even though you'll see in the clip, Jeanine Pirro starts off knowing what I will show you here. Wait, let me get to it. This is from the National Archives webpage. You can see the text of the 20th Amendment here. It says, Section 1, the terms of the President and the Vice President shall end at noon on the 20th day of January, and the terms of Senators and Representatives today on the 3rd of January. And then at the end it says, and the terms of their successors shall then begin. So if you're a lawyer, you know the word shall. That's one of the words they teach you that should be like a flashing red light. That's something that has to happen. So, and Judge Jeanine actually knows that when she's talking to Peter Navarro, White House economic advisor, about the art of the steal and their plans to take back the election that Joe Biden stole or whatever. And I'll talk about that clip with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
But, I also want to talk about something that you've talked about, and you talk about the art of the steal. And we talked about the fact that, now there's a commission. There's an effort by 10, 12 senators to start a commission to count and to review and audit what happened in this last election. And then, in addition to that, there is a certification process. All this has to happen before January 20th. Do you have any hope that this can succeed?
Yeah, let me break a little news for you. Today, as part of a 6-person team, we did a Zoom meeting with hundreds and hundreds of state legislatures across the battlegrounds: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. These legislators, they're hot, they're angry, they want action. What we did as a team, Giuliani was there, Eastman, John Lott, we gave them the receipts. We explained exactly how the Democrat Party, as a matter of strategy, stole this election from Donald J. Trump. And on Monday, I'm coming out with a new report, The Art of the Steal, on my Twitter feed, that shows beyond a shadow of doubt this election was stolen. The Democrats used a lot of legal means to get to an illegal end. And it was a game from the beginning, and it's tragedy, Jeanine, because one thing we shouldn't be strategically gaming is the foundation of this republic. They stole this. For sure. We can prove it. And so other things, breaking news, right. I would not be surprised to see a special counsel on this. And Vice President Pence, he has the authority to give that 10-day window to do what needs to get done. And I cannot imagine when he looks at the facts, he won't vote the right way on that.
And Peter, the interesting thing is that 10-day window it is something that they can change the date. The first January 20th cannot be changed. That's constitutional. But this whole certification thing, the dates can be changed.
Well, it can be changed, anyway, actually.
Peter
we can go past that date. We can go past that date.
Oh.
We can go past that date if we need to. And we got to get this right, as Laura Trump said. Get it right. They stole it. Right. We need to take it back for the people.
All right.
And the punchline of that political comedy clip is when Jeanine Pirro goes, you can go past that date. But, if you have a copy of the Constitution and you read the 20th Amendment, I showed you what the 20th Amendment says. Jeanine Pirro was right. They can't go past that date. That's when, unless someone wants to actually change the Constitution, you'll see later it says that that the 3rd of January, the Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and such meeting shall begin at noon on the 3rd day of January, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. So, like in Section 2, they do give Congress the power to set a different day for when Congress meets, but not for January 20th. So Judge Jeanine Pirro, did not judge that very well. But anyway, now I want to get to the news summaries that cover the two topics I talked about, the anti-Republicans and also the vaccine distribution problem. And CBS News Face the Nation had the longest of the news summaries. I'm going from longest to shortest again this week. And They, again, concentrated mostly on COVID. I've sometimes said CBS should be the COVID broadcasting system because they were the first, earliest of the 5 corporate news programs I cover every Sunday to cover COVID-19 way back in January and February when everyone else was like covering impeachment. And I said at the time, I've repeated this so many times, that when CBS was covering it, I didn't even take their clips about this virus in China. And I said they were either overhyping the danger or they were the only of the corporate outlets that was covering the most important story of the year. And as I've said before, it turned out to be option number 2. Option number 2, so CBS gets credit for that. They have this guy, Carter Evans, not from Atlanta, giving their national COVID report. It's not Mark Strassman from Atlanta. And at the end, Mark Strassman did a report from Georgia on the Georgia Senate race. And they said something, he's like their new national correspondent, so I guess he won't be stuck in Atlanta reporting on COVID every week, but maybe he will, who knows. But anyway, Carter Evans reports from Los Angeles because, you know, I'm here in California, Northern California, which isn't as bad as Southern California, but that is one of the epicenters of the epidemic, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch the CBS News Face the Nation news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. As we begin the new year, optimism over the prospect of vaccinations is facing the reality of delays, confusion, lack of communication, and once more, a federal government seemingly without a coherent plan for making the millions of doses already manufactured accessible to Americans. Overwhelmed states, many struggling with this latest surge, have been left in charge of getting the vaccine to Americans, and they're having a hard time doing so. Meanwhile, the death toll continues to climb. More than 350,000 people have now died of COVID-19 in the U.S. California is the new epicenter of this latest outbreak. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans reports from Los Angeles.
With a new year comes new hope. But while vaccinations are underway across the nation,
it means seeing my grandkids a lot. Yeah, it means everything.
They're not happening fast enough. The Trump administration promised 20 million doses would be given by the end of 2020, but the CDC says just over 4 million people have been inoculated. Part of the problem is finding enough medical professionals to administer the shots.
The local boards of health have been overworked. A lot of them are understaffed.
And there's the time involved, including a 15 to 30-minute observation period after the shot is given. Another delay, vaccine skepticism. A new survey finds 29% of healthcare workers are vaccine hesitant. The growing COVID surge is pushing hospitals in Southern California to the breaking point.
Things are pretty bad. Things are really bad. We're overwhelmed. We're stressed. We're stretched so thin. It's pretty unimaginable.
Some hospitals in the epicenter of LA County are already diverting ambulances. Others are preparing emergency plans for rationing care. And now the Army Corps of Engineers is mobilizing to update oxygen delivery systems at hospitals in LA. New COVID cases here are up almost 1,000% since November. 1 in every 5 people tested is now positive, and statewide, COVID kills someone every 3 minutes. Morgues are overflowing, the dead now filling refrigerated trucks outside. Across the country in North Carolina, workers are setting up field hospitals, preparing for a new surge after the holidays. Same story in Atlanta, where they're converting the convention center into a medical center again.
Today marks the end of the busy holiday travel period. The TSA says in the last 2 weeks, it's screened more than 11 million passengers. That plus the tens of millions who likely traveled by road has experts concerned another surge may be coming right about the time President-elect Joe Biden is being sworn in. Margaret?
Carter Evans, thanks. Around the world, other countries.
And also, CBS News Face the Nation does an around the world, especially for my non-U.S. viewers. You might want to click down on the link in the video description to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel. That's where the link I put down there goes, and on the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel, they pretty much split up the whole program into segments, and the Elizabeth Palmer report on COVID around the world is definitely worth watching, but I wanted, like I said, I already have the CBS News Face the Nation news summary. It's the longest one this week, and you'll see Chuck Todd did not have a pre-recorded package, so NBC News' Meet the Press news summary was much shorter. I think it was the shortest of the news summaries. The second longest one is Fox News Sunday, and they did something like totally the opposite of Face the Nation. I mean, the one thing that I would fault Face the Nation for in the beginning, in their news summaries, they didn't really talk about the anti-Republicans very much. And Fox News does mention that, or at least Trump trying to contest the election. Although what none of the programs, what you'll see in none of these news summaries, I forgot to mention this before I got to the news summaries, is the breaking news from the Washington Post. I actually have a link in the video description to the Washington Post story where they got a recording of a Trump phone call with Georgia election officials, Brad Raffensperger and his lawyer, and there were some other people on the White House side, and it's an over an hour phone call. They've released the transcript, the audio, where he's like berating these Georgia officials to find some votes, and you can just say you reevaluated, and he's just like in this almost incoherent land of conspiracy theories that the Georgia Secretary of State debunks during the call, but it doesn't do any good, and that is like was not well. That happened. That came out after all the news shows, but the Republicans fighting the election results was not really covered in the Face the Nation news summary. It's covered briefly in the Fox News Sunday news summary where Bret Baier's in for Chris Wallace, and then they have Peter Doocy doing the news report. But the one thing you heard almost not at all on Fox News Sunday this morning for some reason was COVID. Certainly nothing about the bumbling of the vaccine rollout. I think they talked about the COVID relief bill briefly, and then they had Alan Alda as their power player of the week, and he mentioned COVID education as part of like healthcare education that he tries to do. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this Fox News Sunday news summary from this morning together over here.
And hello again, and Happy New Year from Fox News today in Atlanta. We are live from Georgia International Plaza for the battle for the Senate. 2 runoff races 2 days from now that will determine the balance of power in Washington. If both Democrats, Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff, win, their party will control the House, the Senate, and the White House. If either Republican, Kelly Loeffler or David Perdue, is reelected, Mitch McConnell would retain control and be able to block much of the Biden administration's agenda. A record 3 million Georgians have already cast their votes in these crucial races. Meantime, President Trump continues to cast doubt on the legitimacy of Georgia's election system after losing the state to Joe Biden. In a moment, we'll speak with one of the Republican candidates, incumbent Senator Kelly Loeffler. But first, to Peter Doocy in Savannah with the closing arguments on the campaign trail. Peter?
Bret, early voting data shows Republicans will need a strong showing north of Atlanta, so that's where President Trump is going tomorrow. And Democrats are going to try to run up the score in Atlanta, so that's where Joe Biden is going. But first, a visit by Kamala Harris here in Savannah.
But see, now Georgia has the opportunity to define the next chapter in American history.
Republican candidates agree, but for different reasons.
We're going to show America that Georgia's a red state. We're going to stop socialism, and we're going to save this country.
In one runoff, Republican Kelly Loeffler faces Democrat Raphael Warnock.
Dangerous, radical Raphael Warnock has not answered for investigations into child abuse, domestic abuse.
Warnock argues recent allegations are irrelevant.
Kelly Loeffler doesn't have a case to make for why she should be sitting in that seat.
In the other runoff, the Republican David Perdue is quarantining after close contact with a COVID-19 infected staffer, but still accusing Democrat Jon Ossoff of hiding transactions with a business linked to China.
This is a ripening scandal, as we now know. He He hid his involvement with the Communist Chinese Party during his primary.
Ossoff claims Perdue is the corrupt one.
We have 2 United States senators who, when they learned about the threat that COVID-19 posed to their own constituents, their first call was to their broker.
Campaigns are trying hard to stick with people that they come across. For example, yesterday at a Canvas launch, organizers sent volunteers away with this chant: "Door knock for Warnock, vote your ass off." Bret?
All right, Peter Ducey reporting from Savannah. Peter, thanks.
I don't know. Was that worth a laugh? I didn't think that was worth being my political comedy clip, the vote your ass off thing. I thought of that joke many weeks ago, but didn't think it was worth even... I don't know. Did I make that joke on the show? Maybe I did. Who knows? But if I did, it was weeks and weeks ago. So too late, Peter Ducey. And you notice that at the very end of his news summary there, he did show Jon Ossoff saying that the first thing that David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler did when they found out about COVID-19 was call their stockbroker, but he didn't say they had inside information and they were investigated for that. And that was really the only spot where they showed Democrats' charges against Republicans, and it was pretty vague. My other criticism of the Peter Ducey news summary is it was almost all like, these are the charges Republicans or accusations Republicans are making against Democrats, and these are the Democrats' responses. Nothing about negative things about the Republicans. And as I said before, no mention of COVID-19, the bumbled vaccine distribution rollout. That barely came up anywhere on Fox News Sunday this morning, which was definitely a huge journalistic bumble, but you can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I'm going to move on to Jake Tapper, CNN State of the Union, which probably had the best of the news summaries, covered everything, and Jake Tapper was like so like brutal. He was brutal this week in terms of giving the unvarnished truth about, I think at one point, I think it's a quote, but he quotes someone calling the anti-republic Republicans the Sedition Caucus, talks about the lies. I even gave him the bonus clip at the end where he cross-examines Jerome Adams, even though he doesn't really go into the math as much as he should when I get to that clip. That's my one Jake Tapper criticism when I get to clip number 14, but this is the CNN State of the Union news summary, where, as always, Jake Tapper says our State of the Union this week. And this week it is facing a very perilous situation. The worst month. December was the worst COVID month. And anyway, I'll talk about it a little more with you after we watch that 2 minutes together over here.
Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is facing a perilous start to 2021. We're beginning the year with the pandemic at its most alarming level yet. December was the deadliest month of the pandemic so far in the U.S., and the race to vaccinate Americans is stumbling out of the gate. Just more than 4 million vaccinations have actually been administered, not even close to the goal of 20 million shots in arms by the beginning of the new year. And with around 3,000 Americans dying every day, what are the president and a big chunk of congressional Republicans focused on? Undermining the results of the election. Essentially a bloodless coup, leading the Republican Party to a state of turmoil. Saturday, 11 Republican senators said they would vote against counting electoral votes in Congress next week, calling for a, quote, emergency 10-day audit of election returns, despite there being, despite there being no evidence of widespread voter fraud. The group is following the lead of Senator Josh Hawley, who says he will formally object to Biden's decisive win, despite zero credible evidence that would justify such a move. Zero. Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska slammed Hawley and other members of the Sedition Caucus, saying, quote, adults don't point a loaded gun at the heart of legitimate self-government. Late Saturday, Senator Mitt Romney said in a blistering statement, quote, I could never have imagined seeing these things in the greatest democracy in the world. Has ambition so eclipsed principle? I want to note that we invited each of the 12 senators involved in plotting this disgraceful effort to come on the show this morning to try to defend and explain their position. Each of them declined or failed to respond. It all recalls what Ulysses S. Grant once wrote in 1861, quote, "There are but two parties now, traitors and patriots." How would you describe the parties today? But let's begin this morning on the pandemic and the vaccine. Joining me now, the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome.
How would you describe the two parties? Which one is the traitors and which one is the patriots? Pretty brutal, like I said, in terms of... And he wasn't quoting Ben Sasse when he said the Sedition Caucus. He quoted Ben Sasse right after saying the Sedition Caucus. So I guess Sedition Caucus was Jake Tapper's appellation of the Republicans. And like I said, I will have the Jerome Adams clip, and you saw Jake Tapper say that none of the 12 Republicans who were going, Republican senators who were going to oppose the electoral results would come on CNN State of the Union and talk to Jake Tapper. When you see how he cross-examines Mike DeWine, who actually isn't even on their side, you'll probably understand why none of them did, although Ron Johnson of Wisconsin went on Meet the Press. That's coming up in just a couple clips. But I want to get to the last two news summaries, ABC and NBC. First, here's Martha Raddatz doing what Chuck Todd does also. They both talk about 2020 being the rear view mirror. I don't know where they both came up with that phrase. I'll do the rest of the criticism from my notes after we watch the clip. The Martha Raddatz giving the ABC News Summary this morning on ABC's This Week over here.
Good morning, Happy New Year, and welcome to This Week. 2020 is finally in the rearview mirror. The first days of the new year bringing a critical political fight to the fore. Both President Donald Trump and President-elect Joe Biden heading to Georgia tomorrow, headlining dueling rallies for candidates in runoff races. The winners will hold the keys to the Senate majority, a balance that has the potential to shape the course of Biden's presidency. This as some Republicans in Congress ready an 11th hour desperate push to overturn the election Trump lost. It's also a critical time in the fight against COVID, which has now taken more than 350,000 lives. Its grip on the country unrelenting. And a new, more contagious variant now reported in 3 states. This as hundreds wait in line for vaccines amid mounting frustration over that slow rollout. More than 14 million vaccines have been shipped across the country, but only about 4.2 million have reportedly made it into the arms of people, far short of the original goal to vaccinate 20 million by year's end. And while we've just closed out the deadliest month so far, many are still flouting public health guidelines, sparking fears of yet another surge on what could be the busiest day for air travel since the pandemic began. Dr. Fauci is standing by, but first, ABC's Trevor Ault leads us off from New York's LaGuardia Airport with the latest. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, Martha.
And I don't have that Trevor Ault report. I cut that off, even though I had Carter Evans on CBS earlier, but it was mostly about how Americans are traveling. They're not really obeying the things that are supposed to keep us safe from the COVID-19 epidemic until we can get all the vaccines into the arms we need for the herd immunity, or herd mentality, as Trump calls it. And I know that there are a lot of Americans who don't even believe in COVID. I'm going to run a clip in just a minute that goes, when I run the Jerome Adams clip at the end, I'll run it till this Trump tweet where he claimed that the COVID-19 deaths in the United States were exaggerated, and all this other misinformation that was bad enough in of itself. But then when I looked at the tweet, I clicked on it and I looked at the replies. There were all these Americans who thought were even worse than Trump, that, their COVID-19 was like a conspiracy. It didn't even exist. It was made up. And I don't know if that's why so many people are traveling or people are just tired. But anyway, that's what you missed in that report from ABC that I cut out. But definitely something to think about. And then the final news summary, for some reason, Chuck Todd did not have a pre-recorded package this week. He just covered the COVID-19 crisis, the vaccine rollout problem, and of course the attack on our democratic republic by a variety of Republicans who apparently don't, like I have been saying, they're anti-republic Republicans. I have not been able to figure out where my Black's Law dictionary went. I had... Where is it? Oh. I have my American Constitutional Law book, and this is what my Black's Law dictionary looks like. It's a big brown law book, and I thought this was it, and I thought I was ready, but because I was going to look up the definition. But basically, a republic is a form of government that it's a representative form of government where the representatives are responsible for enacting the will of the people according to the rule of law. And that's very important. Some people, one of the reasons that a republic is important to me is because, I've heard a lot of people on the right will argue when you say, America's a democracy, they say, no, it's a republic. But a democracy and a republic are not mutually exclusive. In fact, America is a democratic republic. Some people call it a liberal democracy. That's a democracy with rules like our Constitution that are, the no man is above the law and the rule of law, not the rule of man or whatever. And that is what Republicans are attacking. So they're attacking the idea of a republic. And I don't know, I wish I had my Black's Law dictionary to get you a more exact definition, but I wanted to point that out before I show this NBC News Meet the Press news summary, where you'll see Chuck Todd does talk about the attack on our democracy by Republicans, as you saw in multiple previous news summaries, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that final news summary together over here.
Good Sunday morning and a happy new year to everyone. 2020 is finally in the rearview mirror, sort of. January is providing a bit of a 2020 hangover, if you will. Donald Trump's entire presidency has been a stress test on our democracy, and that remains true even now. Consider what has happened since Election Day. Mr. Trump has refused to concede the election. He and his allies have declared widespread fraud where none exists and tried and failed in court to overturn Joe Biden's victory, with plenty of Trump-appointed judges turning away their nonsense lawsuits. But hoping to please the president, at least 12 Senate Republicans do plan to challenge the Electoral College vote on Wednesday. With Vice President Pence's encouragement, while Mr. Trump is urging supporters to show up in D.C. to protest in Washington that day, create a disruptive environment. This week, Rupert Murdoch's pro-Trump New York Post headlined, "Stop the Insanity." The president has also pardoned supporters tied to the Mueller investigation, who, of course, rewarding them with obstructing Mr. Mueller. The president also vetoed the defense budget. That veto was overridden, and threatened to derail the coronavirus relief package, then backed down at the very last minute. But one thing President Trump has not done is pay much attention to the COVID pandemic, which took more lives in the month of December than in any month so far. After the administration did a faceplant on testing, now only a small percentage of the 20 million vaccinations promised by the end of 2020 have been administered, as a new, more virulent strain spreads from state to state. So that's where we're going to begin, because joining me now is the single most respected voice on the pandemic. It's Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's
And I don't have an Anthony Fauci clip this week. I've shown multiple Anthony Fauci clips. He says some of the same things that Jerome Adams says. But anyway, you can see the full NBC News Meet the Press program at a link I put down in the video description. And you saw Chuck Todd there cover all the stories pretty well, I thought. And The one thing that was missing, and the reason Meet the Press was shortest this week, is they didn't have their pre-recorded package. And I think that maybe, I've been thinking about criticisms of Chuck Todd. You know, I showed this tweet from, this is a tweet I got last, on December 28th, the morning after my show. You see the Nil Gravity here say why people hate Chuck Todd, that he's a moron, a tool, defending the status quo, not reporting the facts. Now, one thing I think about Chuck Todd is maybe he isn't the greatest at pivoting what he planned to say based on what his interview subject answers. I used to be a criminal defense lawyer, a criminal defense attorney, and one of my best areas was cross-examination, and that requires listening to what the person's saying and then figuring out a way to attack what they're saying. You can't be totally pre-planned. You have to do your homework, but you can't plan everything you're going to say until you hear what the person you're cross-examining is going to say. And that might be a weakness Chuck Todd has. I think he does a lot of pre-planning. He has most of what he's going to say planned out. And like all of these anchors, he's got a producer talking in his ear. And of all the anchors, he might be the one who's most produced. That's why they always have the longest of the news summaries, because that's something the producer puts together and has the anchor narrate before the show. It's something that can be totally controlled by the producer since it's pre-recorded. Chuck Todd usually has one of those produced packages. That's what I was saying earlier. So, I don't know. I don't think he's bad, but and I think he stands up for the facts. He has a lot of things prepared here. He lets Ron Johnson of Wisconsin get away with a lot of things that maybe he wasn't ready for. You'll see, I have it, this is 9.5 minutes long, and so I have it split into two parts. The first part is 5.5 minutes of Chuck Todd first giving an introduction on the anti-Republic Republicans, and then cross-examining Ron Johnson of Wisconsin about the spreading of misinformation, his support of this refusal to accept the results of the November 3rd election. And I'm going to stop it right when Chuck Todd says stop, about 5.5 minutes in, and I think I've done enough introduction, but except to say that I have the two-part Chuck Todd cross-examination of Ron Johnson of Wisconsin to compare to Jake Tapper's cross-examination of Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, both Republicans. Ron Johnson of Wisconsin is more culpable, but I think Chuck Todd does not do as good a job of showing his culpability in the lies as Jake Tapper does in the next two clips with Mike DeWine. But anyway, I'll get it started and talk some more when you see Chuck Todd say stop about 5.5 minutes in over here.
This morning, the Republican effort to delegitimize Joe Biden's election. 12 Republican senators and senators-elect say that they will reject the election results of swing states won by Joe Biden until an audit of alleged fraud is completed. They now have the support of the vice president. None of this has any chance of actually overturning the election. There was no widespread fraud, number one, but it looks like it's being done to curry favor with President Trump and his supporters. And among the senators taking part is Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. And to his credit, he's agreed to join me this morning. Senator Johnson, welcome back to Meet the Press. So I want to start with this. Last month, you told a newspaper in your home state that you would not object to the Electoral College certification, quote, unless something surfaced. There have been 57 cases filed by the president or his allies. Not a single court has found a single instance of fraud or any of this evidence seen as legitimate. So what has changed to suddenly put you on the side of questioning the results of this election, sir?
Well, good morning, Chuck, and Happy New Year. Let me first respond on COVID. I think our greatest failure in responding to COVID is we've completely ignored early treatment. And we've actually vilified doctors who have had the courage to practice medicine and treat patients with widely available repurposed drugs. So I just have to point that out. We've utterly failed from that standpoint. To answer your question, I would ask that all your listeners, ask our critics to actually read the letter. One of the points we make is that we are not acting to thwart the democratic process. We're acting to protect it. The fact of the matter is that we have an unsustainable state of affairs in this country where we have tens of millions of people that do not view this election result as legitimate. We've just come off of 4 years where the other side refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of President Trump. And here we are again. And what we're saying is we need transparency. And you do not, when you're trying to investigate wrongdoing in elections, you don't have very much time. And so what we're suggesting is let's set up a commission, as they did. I know it's a long time ago, 1877, but let's take a look at a bipartisan commission to organize all the allegations. Certainly what I did in my hearing. It was a 3.5-hour hearing. We barely scratched the surface, but organize the allegations. Let's take off the table the ones that have been explained, but also acknowledge the problem areas that have not been explained so that we can restore confidence in our election system. This is an unsustainable state of affairs right now. Yeah. And that's all we're saying is as long as somebody's going to be objecting to this and we're going to be taking a vote, let's propose a solution in terms of transparency, investigation with the commission.
All right, Senator, I want to quote Senator Ben Sasse for you, because what you're alleging is essentially you and your colleagues have created this controversy. So right now we are locked into a destructive, vicious circle in some ways, as you kind of outlined, which is you made an allegation that there was widespread fraud. You have failed to offer specific evidence of that widespread fraud, but you're demanding an investigation on the grounds that there are allegations of widespread fraud. So essentially, you're the arsonist here. President Trump is the arsonist here. You've started this fire, and now you're saying, whoa, look at this. Oh, my God. All these people believe what we told them because you didn't have the guts to tell the truth that this election was fair.
Chuck, this fire was started back in January of 2017. People like Mark Zaid, in his tweet, the coup has started, first of many steps, rebellion and impeachment to follow ultimately. This was started when the mainstream media dropped any pretense of being unbiased and actually chose sides during this election. This fire was started when you completely ignored, for example, our investigation of Hunter Biden. No evidence of wrongdoing there, and now we find out after the election, no, there is a fair amount of evidence to the point that we have a real FBI investigation.
Senator,
so
all right, I've had enough of hearing this.
No, listen, I've had enough of this too. It's the bias in the media that has created a situation where Republicans and conservatives do not trust the mainstream media, and that is what has destroyed the credibility of the media and our institutions, and really
the destruction
shaking confidence in this election result. So I didn't start this.
Listen, you have spent, and I'm just curious, Senator, you have spent much of your time in the last 2 years carrying a lot of this crazy conspiratorial water for President Trump, whether it was the attempt to somehow blame Ukraine for the interference in the election rather than Russia. You've used your committee to sort of create the illusion of voter fraud, as you just described earlier, because they're, quote, allegations. I'm just trying to understand here, what are you doing it for? You're not trying to overturn the election, you just said. Are you simply trying to curry favor with constituents of the president's? Is that what this is all about? Is this a cynical political ploy?
I'm trying to be transparent. One of the things we found out in our hearing is, the basic allegations kind of fall into 3 categories. I would say the first is the either violation of or lax enforcement of election law. There is voter fraud. There always is. We had one witness talk about 42,000 people voting twice in Nevada. The other issue
just
really
because
is
you
the
have
fact
somebody
that the courts,
say it didn't make it true.
It's easy.
Senator,
it's
none
easy.
of these allegations. Stop. You don't get to.
Sorry about that. I forgot that I had unplugged my earpiece there, and I was listening, and I got you a little bit of feedback there. I apologize for that. I was doing some stuff. I was trying to find my Black's Law Dictionary, which I couldn't do. Although you saw Chuck Todd say stop there, and he's already done a pretty good job. He did come prepared, like I said before I showed the clip. Like I said, I couldn't find my Black's Law Dictionary, but I did take this screenshot of Webster's. So yeah, if you take a look at the screenshot of Webster's here, the definition B1 is pretty much what I was saying before. A government in which supreme power resides in a body of citizens entitled to vote and to exercise and is exercised by elected officers and representatives responsible to them and governed according to law. So that is what the Republicans, the anti-republic Republicans, are attacking there, our democratic republic. And that's pretty sad. But I think that Chuck Todd steps it up in the second half. That was the 5.5 minute part there where he said stop. He finally said stop. And he goes into, he did let Ron Johnson get away with the whole, like, Ron Johnson is an advocate of hydroxychloroquine, and he mentioned, like, using drugs for other uses, for early treatment. Why aren't you letting me talk about that? And he'll say that again at the end, near the end of this clip, the second half of Chuck Todd's cross-examination of him. But the part here where I have to disagree with Nil Gravity, who tweeted me after last week's show. The part where Chuck Todd wins me over, I'll give you two words where Chuck Todd wins me over. He has me at moon landing. And I'll talk about that a little more after you watch this shorter end of that interview together over here.
Stop. You don't get to make these allegations that haven't been proven true. Here's what I don't understand. You understand how our government was set up. The reason we have a judiciary is because partisans like yourself weren't going to be trusted by the public to decide who won or lost an election. Let me ask you this. Who carried the state of Wisconsin?
Well, Vice President Biden has won by 20,000 votes. But there are also issues in Wisconsin. One of the things I point out and was revealed in our hearing is I entered in the record 3 letters written by congressional Democrats to the voting machine manufacturers. Now, at that point in time, I didn't hear Chuck Schumer call it quackery or conspiracy theory or, a ridiculous charade. But that's exactly how he attacked my hearing that I thought was a really good hearing that laid out some of the issues. We had Chris Krebs testify. Chris Krebs said, this is the most secure election, but in our hearing he actually admitted, well, he wasn't talking about potential fraud, he was just looking at hacking. He also admitted that some of these election and tabulation machines are hooked up to the internet, which privately told me that wasn't the case. So again, I didn't criticize Democrats when they were talking about potential hacking of voting machines, but now it's quackery, now it's conspiracy theory. That's the problem, Chuck. There's a double standard here, and we are not being transparent, and we are dismissing the concerns of tens of millions of Americans. Again, I didn't like this fire. This fire was lit over 4 years ago, and we've destroyed the credibility of you have destroyed the credibility of the news media by your bias, and of course people like James Comey, Andrew McCabe, John Brennan destroyed the credibility of the FBI and our justice system as well. We have an enormous problem in this country. It's unsustainable, and the only way you solve it is with information and transparency and hearings and investigations. So it's not quackery, it's not conspiracy theory. It's what's going to be required.
Let me ask you this. Then why didn't you hold hearings about the 9/11 truthers? There's plenty of people who thought 9/11 was an inside job. So what you're basically saying is that there's enough people who believe in conspiracy theory. If there's enough people who hold,
figured was the most relevant issue.
You're going to do it. How about the moon landing?
Obviously,
are you going to hold hearings on that?
what I would like to hold hearings on, what I was talking about, and why did we not spend hundreds of billions of dollars exploring early treatment? Why did we vilify doctors who had the courage to treat COVID patients, practice medicine, try and find available, cheap, repurposed drugs to do so? Why I'd love to hold hearings on that. There are all kinds of things that I'd like to hold hearings on. You have to kind of pick and choose based on priorities. Right now, we have this election. We've got tens of millions of Americans that think this election was stolen. We need to get to the bottom of it. Again, what's explained, we need to explain it, get that off the table. But we also have to acknowledge there were some real problems here. There's some issues that need to be explored and investigated.
You got to ask yourself, when you tell people a million times that something was stolen or something was fraud, and then they believe it, I think you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself why so many people
Chuck, you need to look
this.
at your mirror and
Senator Johnson, I've got to go. I appreciate you coming on.
Collusion with the Trump campaign hoax. That is what you did in the media. You carried that water for years. You destroyed the credibility of the press.
Senator Johnson, other than crediting you for coming on, I appreciate that, because only 2 of your colleagues had the guts to say yes this weekend about this conspiracy theory that you're working on. Thanks for coming on. That I appreciate. When we come back, I'm going to talk to voting rights.
And Chuck even cuts him off at the end there, and he spent the entire interview. That's why it was 9.5 minutes. I cut it into 2 clips for you. Like I said, he had me at moon landing. Though one thing that I thought was missing from that cross-examination, maybe, I like the way he said, you're the arsonist, but do you see how Ron Johnson said he didn't start the fire? Someone should have mentioned Billy Joel. There should have been a Billy Joel reference there. That's my only other comment on that, other than to juxtapose that 9.5 minute cross-examination in 2 clips from Chuck Todd with a 7.5 minute cross-examination of Mike DeWine, Republican governor of Ohio, by Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union. Now, Ron Johnson is a huge conveyor of conspiracy theories, is one of the dozen senators who apparently is going to protest the results of the fair and free election. But Chuck Todd let him get away with, talking about hydroxychloroquine, didn't, call him a liar, didn't say stop the lying. But that's something Jake Tapper says to Mike DeWine, even though Mike DeWine is much more reasonable on the subject. At least Ron Johnson admitted that Wisconsin was won by Trump, but Mike DeWine actually thinks Biden won the presidency, and he still gets a lot of derision from Jake Tapper. I have it split into 2 clips. I'll talk about the first part of that cross-examination with an introduction. Also, you saw there was an introduction about anti-Republicans from Chuck Todd at the beginning of that interview clip, the clip before last I showed, and Jake Tapper does a Josh Hawley versus Josh Hawley thing here. He shows Josh Hawley after impeachment talking about overturning the will of the people. Josh Hawley is the leader of this Republican movement in the Senate. He's the senator from Missouri in the beginning of the State of the Union clip that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
The consequences to the Republic of overturning a Democratic election because you don't like the result and because you believe that election was somehow corrupted, when in fact the evidence shows that it was not. Talking about how elections can't be trusted, that's an interesting approach. I think it's crazy, frankly.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. What a difference a year makes. That was Republican Senator Josh Hawley last January criticizing the Democrats' arguments during President Trump's impeachment trial. I'd like to introduce Senator Josh Hawley to Josh Hawley, who is now leading the charge with no factual basis that has garnered 11 Republican supporters in the Senate to vote against the legitimate election of Joe Biden. Joining me now to discuss this and many other issues, Republican Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio. Governor, first, congrats on the Buckeyes. We have a lot of coronavirus and vaccine news to get to.
Very happy about that.
With
great news.
One small light for you there. I have to begin by asking about what's going on in your party right now in the Electoral College. vote count on Wednesday, including a number of House Republicans from Ohio, and I'm not sure what Senator Portman's going to do. Republican Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska says the president and his allies, by fomenting this effort to vote against Joe Biden's legitimate win, he says they're, quote, pointing a loaded gun at the heart of legitimate self-government. Do you agree?
Jake, I think we need to put this in kind of historical perspective. First of all, the framers of our Constitution set up a system that has worked, and it's worked exceedingly well. We do this well. Second, if you go back, I was in Congress in 2005 when we had some Democrats who wanted to challenge and did challenge Ohio's election, and there was no, basis for that. And that did not work. So this is not the first time that this is happened. We're only 17 days away from Inauguration Day. Are there some problems in the system as far as potential fraud or fraud that occurred? Yeah, but we've not seen anything that rises to the level that would have changed the outcome of the election. I think Senator Portman, you mentioned Senator Portman. I think Senator Portman has a good proposal. And that proposal is to get two very distinguished people in this country, Democrat and Republican, have a commission and to take a hard look at voter security.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people in this country who are very concerned about
because they've been lied to, Governor.
And with the change in
Governor, because they've been lied to by President Trump
Jake,
for weeks.
Jake, time out a minute. Let's stay at the big picture. The big picture with changes in technology, potential hacking, all of these things, we need to have a commission, as Senator Portman says, that takes a long look at this. Not something you can do in 10 days, but to take a look at this. Why is this important? If for no other reason than there's a lot of people out there who are questioning this election. People need to have confidence in the system. And if you put together a bipartisan commission, that I think for the long run is something that really should take place.
So I don't know, maybe Jake Tapper was prepared for that bipartisan commission idea, but you'll see Jake Tapper does a much better job of responding to what Mike DeWine actually said. And especially, I talked about derision. He's like dripping with derision for, you can do your commission, I don't care. He says something like that. But he talks about how people, kind of the same thing Chuck Todd said, that, they're the arsonists now saying that they have to deal with the fire, or they're saying people have concerns, but it's because they've been lied to. And Jake Tapper is much more adamant about stopping the lies, and also how you can't avoid the source of the problem. If you can't have a solution that avoids the source of the problem, when the source of the problem is people lying who have to stop lying. And my favorite part, I know I'm kind of pre-criticizing the clip which people complain about, or at least one or two people complain about every now and then, that I should criticize the clip after I show it. But my favorite line, my favorite response from Mike DeWine, who's not a bad guy, and like I said, he's not as culpable as Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, who didn't get as bad, as brutal a cross-examination as you're about to see from Jake Tapper. But my favorite line from Mike DeWine is, well, you can make that point. Watch for that. Well, you could. That I actually laughed. I lulled. I laughed out loud when Mike DeWine said, well, you can make that point in the second half of the Jake Tapper cross-examination over here.
Governor, here's the thing. First of all, in 2004, 2005, there was a handful of Democrats. It was an effort that was completely disavowed by Senator John Kerry, who had just lost the election. There were not big numbers about this. The president or the Democrat in that case was not calling for an overturning of the election. I'm not excusing those votes, but you cannot even remotely compare it. Look, you were one of the first Republican office holders to acknowledge the reality of Joe Biden's win. There are Republican senators. This is, don't forget me. Mitt Romney, Ben Sasse, others. There are Republican senators who say that people in your party are doing real, lasting damage to American democracy by fully embracing these dangerous conspiracy theories. Whatever Blue Ribbon Commission you and Portman want to set up, that's fine. I don't care. But this isn't about actual allegations of legitimate fraud. This is about fomenting lies in order to undermine the democracy. It's very different.
Jake, you can make that point, but I'll go back to my point, and I think it's valid as well. And what's valid about it is that we have a lot of people in this country who are questioning this election. That's a problem.
But why?
Us.
Why? Why do you think they are?
Why? Look, you can go through why. The question for us is, what do we do about it? And what we need to do about it is to again, get some very well-respected people from both parties. Take a look at this. Now, I'm not saying they take a year to do it, but take a look at this and see, how are elections being run? Look, I'm biased, but I think Frank LaRose, who's our Secretary of State and our Ohio system, and former Secretary of States in Ohio, Democrat and Republican, have done a phenomenal job. I think Ohio does it very well. For example, when we do mail ballots, we've done this for a number of years, we have verification based on these mail ballots. I think Ohio sets a very high bar. And that's what we're used to dealing with in the state of Ohio. And I think, frankly, that should be the bar across the country. So I'm not saying other states don't do it well, but I'm saying we have to restore confidence in the people in this process. You can go through and talk about why we have this. The reality is it's not healthy in our system for that many people to think the system's not working.
Well, I want to turn to COVID, but let me just make 2 points.
Yeah,
one is
I'd like to, because that's what I work on every day.
The why is important, because the why is that President Trump and his minions, I'm not including you, and I'm not including Portman, but President Trump and his minions have been lying to people for weeks now about this election. And because of that, these people have been lied to. They now have concerns. So that's the reason. And the solution is they should stop lying. The second point is whatever
it's not that simple.
It is that simple.
There are some
let me just finish my second point
that people can have. Okay.
The second point is whatever Blue Ribbon Commission is formed and whatever they conclude, President Trump will attack them the same way that he has attacked every single Republican who has stood up for election integrity, whether it is the governor of Arizona or the governor of Georgia or the commissioner of Philadelphia, who's a Republican, or the Maricopa County Board of Canvassers. I could go on and on. But let's turn to COVID, because I know that's what you're focused on.
Well, let me say one more thing then. The system works. The judicial system. You and I've had this talk before. It has worked. You have had Republican-appointed judges all the way to the United States Supreme Court who have made decisions. And I remember we had Democrats who said, they won't be able to make good decisions. They've made decisions. And it should restore some trust that people in the system does, in fact, work. The judicial system works, and our mechanism for electing a president of the United States works.
Well, tell your colleagues, because they're the ones who are not agreeing with it. But let me just at least ask you.
Let's talk about COVID.
Yeah.
And then they talk about COVID, but I think that last clip was the clip of the week of all the clips I'm showing, in terms of Jake Tapper doing a great job cross-examining Mike DeWine, actually listening to what he said and responding, refuting. Ron Johnson talked about previous times when Democrats had objected to, in 2000 and 2004, when 2016 even, there were Democrats who staged some sort of protest, but it wasn't the president, it wasn't the candidate, it was much smaller, more fringe, whatever. It wasn't, John Kerry in 2004 had conceded. In 2000, Al Gore, I showed that last week, and or was it the week before? I think it was 2 weeks ago. I showed the Al Gore concession speech, and Hillary Clinton conceded the day after she lost the 2016 election. So that was something Jake Tapper cross-examined Mike DeWine on a lot better than Chuck Todd did. And they were both good, though, especially if you compare it to Bret Baier's cross-examination of Senator Kelly Loeffler, or Loeffler, maybe it is Loeffler. In this next clip, Bret Baier lets her get away with basically taking no position on any of these issues. At least Ron Johnson said that Trump lost Wisconsin, Biden won Wisconsin. Kelly Loeffler won't say who won Georgia, won't say how, even though she's up for this runoff election on January 5th, Tuesday, she won't say how she's going to vote on January 6th regarding accepting the results of the election that got her to the runoff on January 5th. And Bret Baier does not do as good a job of either of the last two anchors in terms of pointing out, there's no stop the lies, there's no conspiracy theory, well, I'll talk about the clip a little more after we watch that much worse cross-examination of a Republican on the anti-Republicans together over here.
This weekend, Senator Ted Cruz campaigned for you. He and 10 other Republican senators and senators-elect say they will join Senator Josh Hawley in a vote against certifying Electoral College votes if there isn't an audit of disputed states' votes, including this one. Now, you are not on that list. Why not?
Well, I've said from the start, everything's on the table here, and I'm seriously looking at that. We have to make sure that Georgia and all of Americans trust our voting process. But my number one objective right now has to be winning on January 5th so that we can get to the bottom of what happened in these elections. We know that Democrats will never get to the bottom of it. That's what we're fighting here for. And I'm continuing to fight for this president. He's fought for us, and so we're going to stay on top of that.
So the president says this election was stolen. In fact, he tweeted this weekend that because of how the process was done here in Georgia, the election, including the Senate run, was, quote, illegal and invalid. Do you agree with him?
Well, look, the president has been very consistent. He came down to Georgia in December and said, you have to get out and vote for David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. You have to exercise your right to vote. He's coming back here tomorrow night to Dalton, Georgia, and he's going to tell voters the same thing. You have to get out and vote, Georgia, because this is too important. The country is on the line. They're counting on us. We won't get a second chance. If we lose this election, we could lose the future of the country, because we know Chuck Schumer wants to abolish the filibuster, get rid of the Electoral College, have D.C. statehood, raise our taxes, and the list goes on. Georgians, that's out of step with Georgia.
But I guess, and I know you're focused on January 5th, but January 6th, you have to make that decision. And so today, can you say whether you will certify the Electoral College votes or not, maybe specifically from Georgia?
Well, I'm looking very, very closely at it, and I've been one of the first to say everything's on the table. I'm fighting for this president because he's fought for us. He's our president, and we're going to keep making sure that this is a fair election, and I'm looking very closely at it. But again, none of it matters if I can't win on January 5th.
Right. Well, some of your other Republican colleagues have called these overturn election efforts bad for your party, bad for the country. Senators Romney, Toomey have talked out about it. Senator Toomey releasing a statement about the senators' efforts, Senator Cruz and Hawley. They fail to acknowledge that these allegations have been adjudicated in courtrooms across America and were found to be unsupported by evidence. I acknowledge that this past election, like all elections, had irregularities, but the evidence is overwhelming that Joe Biden won this election. Is he right?
Well, look, we have every right to take these votes in the way that we believe reflects our constituency and our state. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to speak for the people of Georgia. But the worst thing for our party is if David Perdue and I don't win on Tuesday. We have to win because we have to be able to get to that next step, to be able to vote our conscience and what is right on January 6th. And then we have to be able to pursue holding people accountable for how these elections were handled.
But have you seen evidence, enough evidence of fraud to overturn any state's election as a senator and what you've seen so far?
Well, certainly here in Georgia, we have upwards of 200 open investigations. We're in the courts right now. We have heard and seen too much. We need to get to the bottom of it. And
but Senator, you know there have been 60-plus court cases that have been gone before judges, some of them Trump-appointed judges, where they haven't found that evidence.
Well, these cases haven't been heard. They deserve to be heard. We need to make sure that we get to the bottom of this because the integrity of voting is at the core of our democracy. We have to protect that. We have to have people who are willing to fight for it and defend it. And that's what I'm looking at right now. This is a big decision for the 6th, but I have to stay laser focused on the 5th because if we don't win the 5th, we will lose the country.
Let's talk about this race, specifically your opponent on the campaign trail.
And so that's it. That was what Bret Baier did in his cross-examination of Kelly Loeffler. Apparently it's Kelly Loeffler. And you saw her responses. She never took a position on any... I mean, she's looking at it very closely, and everything's on the table, and she supports the president because the president is fighting for the people of Georgia, and I don't know, it's almost like she's leaving herself an out. What is the main thing that is still up in the air? I mean, Trump is apparently, I talked about this Washington Post story. There's a link down in the video description. It's titled, "I just want to find 11,780 votes, in extraordinary hour-long call, Trump pressures Georgia Secretary of State to recalculate the vote in his favor." And some people say he may have actually violated the law, although that's kind of questionable as a lawyer, because he talked in kind of vague language. I mean, it's basically a jury question. It depends on its prosecutorial discretion, I would say, because you can extort someone with vague language. You hear it on, in all the mafia movies, like, "Nice business you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it." But there has to be like a context that the jury decides that that's really a threat or whatever. It's like, you're taking a big risk. He talks about criminal consequences and taking a big risk and asking him to do things that are illegal, kind of. But the thing is that Trump is so delusional. He keeps saying that he won and he got all these more votes, and he gets debunked by his own, by the Republican Secretary of State of Georgia. If you read the transcript, or anyway, I'm like going way off on that tangent there. But Kelly Loeffler never takes a position, doesn't say how she's going to vote on January 6th. So that the voters on January 5th can decide. I mean, I hope she loses. I hope that the Senate ends up being 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans, so that Vice President Kamala Harris can be the deciding vote. And that is a very razor-thin majority, but still a Democratic majority in the Senate and a pretty thin majority in the House, where Nancy Pelosi was just re-elected Speaker today as they convened under the 20th Amendment. Remember, the 20th Amendment says that Congress is supposed to convene on the 3rd of January, which is today. So anyway, I do have a couple more Republicans answering questions about the anti-Republic Republicans, although I was looking at the live comments along the way. I appreciate all of the live comments. I saw a couple more Super Chat contributions. Lulu Girl, and Tom Trask, both hoping for sardine. I told a sardine story a few weeks ago about pizza and stuff, and I've gotten so many sardine comments. I just, for the sardine commenters out there, I wanted to just hold this up for you. Can you see what this is? I have sardines. So for all the people out there who are concerned with sardines, I just want to say I have sardines. And Chair's Bed showed up briefly to give a Super Chat contribution. But the last couple Republicans I'm going to show you are Christie on ABC and then Asa Hutchinson on CBS. And both of these are kind of weak. Maybe even compared to the Kelly Loeffler cross-examination on Fox News. But I'm going to start with Christie, and I can't remember who it was who skewered Christie. Let me see if Christie this week stink of Trump. Who said, it was Nicole Wallace asking Christie last week on ABC whether he's trying to clean the stink of Trump off of him. So he got pretty heavily cross-examined by another panel member last week about the way he's trying to claim that he wasn't a supporter of Trump. Well, he's not. He was a supporter of Trump in 2016. He was a supporter of Trump in 2020. And now, as the Republican Party is going crazy with the conspiracy theories, he's trying to wash the stink of Trump off of him. And Martha Raddatz doesn't really point out how he still has the stink of Trump on him, but does ask him about some of these same issues. This is the best I could do from ABC. They didn't have another Republican on. I don't know if that's because none of them would come on, but this is Martha Raddatz cross-examining Christie, who is an ABC contributor, also kind of a pundit. I usually don't take Christie clips because I take newsmakers, not pundits. He's not governor of New Jersey anymore, but he may see himself as the future of the Republican Party where he supported Trump, but he doesn't have the really bad Trump stink, I guess, as Nicole Wallace was saying last week. But I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that ABC clip together over here.
Now when Republicans, 74 million Americans, have concerns about election integrity, we're supposed to just sit down and shut up?
And Martha Raddatz also does a little intro where she shows Josh Hawley what he's saying now, not what he said a year ago like Jake Tapper did, but then shows some Democrats going all the way to calling it seditious before cross-examining Christie on the issue in the clip I'll really show for you now over here.
Now when Republicans, 74 million Americans, have concerns about election integrity, we're supposed to just sit down and shut up? This is the one opportunity that I have as a United States Senator. This process right here, my one opportunity to stand up and say something, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
This is just grossly irresponsible by Senator Hawley.
It's a lot of BS.
It borders on sedition or treason.
It is a misuse of office.
This is the political equivalent of barking at the moon.
Fierce criticism from Senate Democrats over plans by at least a dozen GOP senators and senators-elect to contest the Electoral College vote certification in Congress on Wednesday, which will confirm Joe Biden won November's election. For more, let's bring in our powerhouse players, ABC News contributors Christie and Rahm Emanuel. Happy New Year to you both. And Chris, I want to start with you. Those senators are joined by at least 140 House Republicans who will also object. Mike Pence says he welcomes the effort. They know it will go nowhere in a Democratic-controlled House. What are they doing?
Well, that's my point, Martha. Listen, Joe Biden will be confirmed. His electoral votes will be confirmed in the House and in the Senate. But this is not unusual either. Let's remember the Democrat members of the House objected in 2000, objected in 2004, objected in 2016. But the thing that matters the most is the reason it will go nowhere is because there's been no evidence of widespread fraud. And that's been determined by Republican and Democratic governors across the country. It's been determined, most importantly, by the Republican Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, who no one could say has not been a loyal fighter for the president. And so the facts are the facts, and that's what I've been saying since election night. If there was evidence, show us. There's been no evidence shown, and that's why Joe Biden will be confirmed next week.
And you've also heard what Mitt Romney has been saying. He said he never could have imagined seeing these things in the greatest democracy in the world, and asking, has ambition so eclipsed principle? So I do want to go back to that. What are they doing? I mean, you cite other elections. 2000 was an extremely close election. This is not. Is this a case of ambition eclipsing principle? Chris.
I'm not a mind reader, Martha. So, I'm not a mind reader, Martha. So I don't know what's in each one of these folks' heads. But what I can say is that 2004 wasn't that close an election, and Democrats objected. And 2016 was essentially the same election as this one, certainly from an electoral vote perspective, and there were some Democrats who objected. That's not to justify what's happening, Martha, but it's just to say that it's not unusual for politicians in Congress to play politics. And that's what's going on. What matters the most and what makes us the most vibrant democracy in the world is it will be confirmed in a bipartisan fashion next week by both the House and Senate, by both Republicans and Democrats. And the reason for that is because the American people's votes will be respected. They are being respected by a bipartisan majority in both houses. And then we'll move on to the very important issues of the day.
And Ram, will the country really move on?
So yeah, that was Christie. I don't think he was as well cross-examined by Martha Raddatz. Dash. Here's Dash. Here's the sardines, but you're not going to get to see Dash eat sardines today. We'll see if we can get something like that this month. Cat hair is going everywhere. Didn't I ruin a black shirt this way sometime in the last couple months? I'm letting... There, you got some live Dash. Now I'm covered in cat hair. But the Christie, like I said, got off pretty easy. Got off easier than Nicole Wallace let him get off last week with the stink of Trump. Martha Raddatz didn't ask him any more existential questions about, now do you feel sorry that you supported Trump, that you coached him for the debates, that you voted for him in the November 3rd election? None of that. Now that Trump is obviously trying to short circuit our Democratic Republic, along with 20 senators who Christie is criticizing, but is that like a strategic move at this point? That's the point I was trying to make. And then these cross-examinations, well, I guess they're not... The Jake Tapper one was the best, then Chuck Todd, then I guess Bret Baier with Kelly Loeffler, that was kind of weak. But that Martha Raddatz cross-examination of ABC News contributor Christie was also pretty weak. Not barely pushing back on the, well, Democrats have done it too thing, not as well as Jake Tapper did. And then the weakest cross-examination of all, I guess, is this brief broaching of the subject by Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation this morning, talking to actual governor, not like former governor Christie, but actual Arkansas governor Asa Hutchinson, in the final clip on this Republican topic tonight over here.
I'm glad we have you today to talk about the vaccine and distribution. I want to quickly ask you something, though, on the political front as a Republican. Nearly a quarter of Senate Republicans say they have concerns about voter integrity and plan on Wednesday to challenge Joe Biden's Electoral College win. This is, to be very clear, all but certain to fail in terms of changing the outcome of the election. But other Republican senators say this is destructive to do in the first place. Where do you stand?
Well, it's a process that they have the right to initiate. I think it's a little bit of a Don Quixote jousting at windmills efforts. I think it is designed, certainly it will fail. Joe Biden is our president-elect, and he will be confirmed in that capacity. I do think that from a state perspective, the challenges have been initiated through recounts and court challenges, and that's how we work in our Electoral College state by state. And so when it gets to Congress, it's really a limited opportunity to review the intricacies of the election process. We should have confidence in what has been done and the reviews and the recounts. And let's all recognize that while the system is not perfect, it worked state by state, and we should accept those results and move on to do some good things for our country.
So I understand you do not support that effort. Thank you for your clarification there, Governor. I want to move on to the virus.
And as I said much earlier in the show, that CBS might be the COVID broadcasting network or COVID broadcasting system or coronavirus broadcasting system, because they focus in on that COVID story. And I do criticize Margaret Brennan for not doing more to point out some of the things you saw in the previous cross-examinations of Republicans on this anti-Republicanism that apparently is taking over a large part of the Republican Party. A majority of the members of the House, 140 members of the House, are apparently going to protest the results of the free and fair election, and then 20 of the 50, give or take a couple, Republican senators, depending on what happens in Georgia. But that's not a majority, but it's a very significant number of the Republicans. And I don't know how that Republican split is going to turn out. I've seen some people saying it's actually going to be the end of the Republican Party. It's going to, like, this vote is going to be like the vote that destroyed the Whig Party and started the Republican Party. And I'm like way over time already. I don't want to go into all that history from the 19th century, but I don't know, maybe that's something I can talk about coming up. But you can let me know what you think of all those different... I promised you that I would have all 5 of the corporate news programs anchors cross-examining some Republican. So you saw Asa Hutchinson and Christie and Mike DeWine and Kelly Loeffler and Ron Johnson all get cross-examined on the big 5 corporate news outlets. I thought Jake Tapper did the best, so I thought I would give him the bonus clip on one of the big stories on COVID-19 this last week or two, that the vaccine rollout is not going well. The fact that we have a vaccine less than a year after the first coronavirus case in our country, that is a huge success that, Trump can take credit for, since it happened during his administration, although a lot of it has to do with the development of this whole messenger RNA technology and investment in science over many years, over multiple administrations, but mainly Obama. Thanks, Obama. But I've said in the first couple weeks after the election, when the Pfizer and then the Moderna vaccines were approved, emergency use authorizations, that Trump was stepping on his own success by continuing to contest the election he lost, where if he had conceded, he could have basked in the glow of success of Operation Warp Speed. But now Operation Warp Speed has hit a huge snag, and this is something Joe Biden I've seen say over and over again, that producing the vaccine is not the same thing as getting the vaccine into arms, shots into arms, and that is something that there are some problems with the distribution networks. They were supposed to be, at one point there were supposed to be 100 million doses by the end of the year, but as recently as December 14th, I think in this clip, you'll see Jake Tapper cross-examine Jerome Adams, the U.S. Surgeon General, saying there would be 20 million doses administered by the end of 2020. And you saw that in some of the news summaries earlier, and it was actually only 4 million. And at the rate they're going, it would be like 5 years till we get to herd immunity. And my one criticism, and because I'm going to finish up pretty fast at the end, because I'm getting tired and it's been a long day. I've spent 8 to 10 hours. I started at 6-something a.m. and it's 8, so 14 hours, although I took some breaks in there and to watch all the shows and capture the clips and do the broadcast. So the one criticism I would have of Jake Tapper here is the math. He lets Jerome Adams get away with saying, well, the good news is in the last 72 hours, we've done 1.5 million vaccinations. You know, that's 500,000 a day. Well, if you want to get to herd immunity, if you want to like vaccinate 200 and 300 million people or whatever, at 500,000 people a day, that's going to take 600 days to get to 300 million, or even it'll take to get to 250 million. That's 80%, I guess, of whatever. I don't know. That might be herd immunity. That's still going to take 500 days. That's like well into 2022. You really need like 2 million a day if you want to get, in 120 days. That's 4 months. That'll get us to the spring maybe. To do that, you need millions of vaccinations every day. And the one criticism I have of Jake Tapper in the clip I'm going to end with of the news clips is that he just doesn't do that math and lets Jerome Adams. Otherwise, he does a good job, but that math is missing in this final news clip. The bumbling of the vaccine distribution over here.
Authorization that was given by the FDA. But let's talk about this, because on December 14th, you told me that those 20 million, you said that it would be 20 million Americans vaccinated by the end of the year. Take a listen.
If we can do that, then we can help protect everyone as we wait for more and more of these doses to come out. 20 million people vaccinated in December. We'll be up to 50 million by January and 100 million by February.
Okay, that obviously did not happen. We're only at 4 million right now, and we're into January. What went wrong?
Well, I want people to understand that the projections we were putting out were based on what we could control at the federal level. And we did deliver on 20 million doses delivered, but you're always going to have more doses allocated versus delivered versus shots in arms. And I just want to be frank. When you ask what went wrong, we have to understand that this virus also occurred in the midst of a surge, and a lot of the local capacity to be able to vaccinate was being used for testing and responding to surges. We have to understand that it occurred over the holidays, and people in health departments and in hospitals take holiday breaks too. But the good news is that we're seeing it quickly ramp up thanks to our state partners. In the last 72 hours, we saw 1.5 million first shots reported. If you extrapolate that out, and many people are extrapolating numbers, that's 500,000 a day. But I want everyone to know that over the next week or two is when we really should be paying attention closely and making sure we continue to see this ramp up. And I expect that it will. Dr. Messinier from the CDC has said that we are seeing this ramp up, and we expect to see it rapidly ramp up into the new year. And I want people to have hope. I want them to have hope that the vaccines delivered are being translated more and more into shots. What I'm most concerned about, and you and I talked about, Jake, the last time, is actually uptake. And you've got Governor DeWine coming on. I saw an article last week that 60% of his nursing home workers refused the vaccine. That's something that I'm terribly concerned about. We have to make sure not just we get vaccines there, but that people accept them.
And we'll ask about that. But just to be clear, you did say 20 million Americans vaccinated in December. That did not happen. And there are a lot of people
That was my hope.
Well, we have hope, and everybody wants to feel optimistic, but also the Trump administration has shown itself sometimes to have the policy position of just letting the states, passing all the buck to the states. Republican Senator Mitt Romney, he called the lack of vaccine progress inexcusable, woefully behind. He proposed several ideas, such as mobilizing all medical workers, creating a schedule for vaccination, saying, quote, "I know that when something isn't working, you need to acknowledge reality and develop a plan, particularly when hundreds of thousands of lives are at stake." Do you acknowledge what Romney's saying here, that this isn't working and something needs to change?
Well, again, I'm telling you that things are changing. 1.5 million doses in the last 72 hours. That's meaningful change. And we're working with the governors. We're working with everyone to make sure we improve upon this process. I don't want anyone to think I'm being Pollyanna-ish here. There's what we delivered, and we hope that those will be translated into vaccinations. That has not occurred to the way that we would like. But as Tony Fauci has said, this was always going to be the most difficult vaccine rollout in history, even if it wasn't superimposed on a surge and a holiday season. And so I want people to understand that 4 million vaccinations reported being delivered by the end of the year, when many of the people who were saying it was a failure were saying we wouldn't have any vaccinations by the end of this year, is something that we can build upon, and we commit to continuing to build upon that. I've been traveling and working with the states and the governors, and if anyone has suggestions, we're listening. The task force, we're working every single day trying to figure out how we can help the states. $300 million delivered to the states so far, plus billions more in the new bill. Thank you, Congress, for delivering on that. We want to make sure they have the resources. The Commission Corps, which I helped lead with Admiral Giroir, is being deployed. National Guard. We're using everything to get these vaccines into arms. So not Pollyanna-ish. There's projections, there's reality, and then there's what we're doing to improve. We're going to work to improve with the states, and I commit to the American people that you've got 100% of my focus, my attention, and the Commission Corps' focus and attention to make this happen.
Unfortunately, we don't have 100% of the president's focus. He's focused on trying to undo the results of the election. And when he mentions COVID, he says things like what he just tweeted, another lie about coronavirus this morning. He tweeted, the number of cases
And I left that Trump tweet up a little longer so you could read it. I promised that much earlier in the show, that at the end of the Jerome Adams cross-examination by Jake Tapper, that Trump tweet about coronavirus deaths being exaggerated, which is ridiculous, and I don't have time to go into that, but I did pretty much pre-criticize the clip in that it was a good cross-examination of Jerome Adams as to what he had said previously, but Jake Tapper didn't cross-examine the good news that we're up to 500,000 a day when we need about 2 million shots into arms every day if we want to get to herd immunity. Well, you have to get a second shot 3 weeks later of the Pfizer vaccine, and then the Moderna one, I think it's even longer. I think it's like a month. I'm not sure of the Moderna one, so 2 million a day for 4 months, 120 days to get to 240 million people, and then they all need a second shot. So it's really sometime in June when you get to your herd immunity, and we're not getting 2 million a day. That's the math that Jake Tapper didn't point out there, and no one really pointed out in any of the cross-examinations of Anthony Fauci or the people talking about COVID on the Sunday shows. Anyway, like I said, that's the last clip. That's the one clip on the vaccine distribution failure topic that was somewhat covered, not on Fox News, but on all the other programs. The final clip I have for you is my Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip. This is a couple hours ago, right before we fed Dash and Sandy. I wanted to show you how brazen Dash the cat is here, because it's Sandy who gets fed here. This is Sandy's food area, and I've shown you before how we feed Dash the cat a piece of dog food because of the way he hangs out here. But you'll see they're milling around the food area, and Dash the cat is just much more brazen about wanting the food than Sandy, even though this is Sandy's food area in the Dash and Sandy clip to end the show tonight over here. That cat has a lot of balls for a cat that's been neutered. That's all I can say about that. That's the brazenness that I wanted to show you. No, but that's anyway what I'm going to end the show with. I appreciate all of you who came to watch the live show, the recorded show, viewers. I've got links down in the video description for ways you can support the program financially. Patrons on Patreon or direct PayPal contributors at the $5 level get this hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker, and then at the $10 level you get the sticker plus this ACLU Constitution. I just sent one of these out to PayPal contributor in the last week. And then this next week, some new patrons on Patreon are getting the sticker and the Constitution. So look for those links down in the video description. I hope you appreciate all the time and effort I put into picking out the clips, putting together my commentary and criticism in my head, and then hopefully combining those two for the show I just broadcast. And until next week, Sandy just came in, but until next week, or until I have some reason to upload some other video or cover some other topic, like maybe the Georgia election or what happens on January 6th with Congress accepting or not accepting the results of the Electoral College, and then Proud Boys demonstrating in D.C. It's going to be a big week. Oh, and then tomorrow, Monday, some UK judge is going to decide if Julian Assange gets extradited to the United States. So that's big news Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We'll see what happens, but until something happens that I want to cover, or until next Sunday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.